Here's what we're learning about the deal. It calls for a 4-day truce in the fighting, which is set to begin at 10 a.m. local time. That's 3 a.m. Eastern time. This is according to Egyptian state media. The release of 50 hostages held in Gaza in exchange for 150 Palestinian prisoners in Israel. The pause in fighting will allow larger convoys of humanitarian aid to get into Gaza. The deal also provides an additional day of truce for every 10 additional hostages released. U.S. officials say 3 out of the 9 American hostages are expected to be part of the initial release, including a 3-year-old girl. The timing of the releases is not fully clear, but they are expected to begin by tomorrow morning. Joining us now for more, correspondent Sarah Coates. She's live in Tel Aviv. Sarah, what more can you tell us about all this?
Well, look, a spokesperson for Hamas has also said to come out that this 4-day ceasefire will come into effect at 10 a.m. local tomorrow. And what we can expect to see is groups of around 12 or 13 of these Israeli hostages being released every day of this ceasefire. Now, we do know that it will be 30 children, 8 mothers and 12 other women in this first batch, while on the Palestinian side, there will be women and also juveniles. Now, it is important to add that none of these people who have made it onto a list, I must add, the Justice Ministry making clear a list of these potential people, none of them can have been convicted of murder. So they are set to be released around the same time as these Israeli hostages, bit by bit, as soon as it's deemed that these Israeli hostages are safe. Now, what will happen here is that Hamas will hand these people over to the International Red Cross, who'll then hand them over to Israeli authorities. They'll then be driven or flown into Israel to a hospital where they'll undergo a series of medical checks before being taken to a more isolated medical facility where they'll be introduced or reintroduced to their families. Now, after this, there'll be an assessment on these people on whether they can give any intel, whether they can give a debrief on exactly what happened to them while they were in captivity. And look, all of this is potentially another wave could happen after this initial 4-day period, depending on how well it goes. And what we do need to remember is there are around 30 women and children who do remain in the Strip that Hamas says it has no idea where they are, and this could give them more time to find them.
And Sarah, that is what Israel has said now for a while. They were hesitant to do any kind of ceasefire, even a temporary one, of course, because they felt that it would give Hamas time to regroup, to re-strategize, to rearm. So what do you think was the detail in this deal or the change in public sentiment that made Israel okay with a stoppage, given the concerns they had expressed prior?
Well, look, there has been so much pressure on the Israeli government, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, to do everything he can to get these people back. We've seen thousands of people march over the last week or so from Tel Aviv all the way to Jerusalem, protests right around the country. And many people were saying that they believed that the government, the military, was putting its ambitions for this campaign in the Gaza Strip ahead of getting these hostages back. And we do need to remember one other incident that happened all the way back in 2011 was the release of one Israeli captive. His name was Gilad Shalit. He was an Israeli soldier. He was taken from the Israeli side of the border, taken into Gaza. That was in 2006, held there until 2011. And in 2011, he was released in exchange for 1,000 Palestinian prisoners. So this just goes to show how much public pressure there is on the government. It was the same back then to just bring one person home. So a big deal here in Israel.
And if you think just there's so many hostages involved in this that it's hard to imagine that there won't be anything that Israel will do to get them back. That was just one, like Sarah just mentioned. So it's a lot more than that. And
Palestinians coming home as well, many of them are going to be women and children as well. It's a huge development, and what incredible relief for those families of those who are being held captive, including children, mind you, children. Correspondent Sarah Coates in Tel Aviv once again for us. Thank you, Sarah.
All right, let's talk more about those hostage negotiations. Former hostage coordinator and U.S. Navy SEAL officer Dan O'Shea joins us now. Welcome back to the show. When we spoke yesterday, this was tentative, and you, along with other military analysts that we've spoken with have said that, you know, any pause in this fighting is only going to help Hamas. In a situation like this, when there are so many hostages involved, including Americans, do you think that this was the right way to go? And if not, given your experience, what should have been done in order to bring some home?
Well, I think the reality of for both sides, Hamas was up against the wall. They've been largely crushed in the north, and they were basically brought to their knee by the IDF offensive, to the fact that they were willing to go to the negotiating table and make concessions to get this deal off the ground. Now, for the same token, Israel had to do the same because they're under tremendous pressure from their own people, particularly the families of all these hostages. And again, it's over 240 odd hostages. We presume 50 are going to be released in the coming days. And it was just, and it's why the hostages were taken in the first place, because they are the bargaining chip for Hamas. So we can see this pattern play out over the coming weeks and months for the rest of these 200 left, or 190 that are going to still be remaining even after the ceasefire is put into effect.
And I know this is an odd question. We're talking about human beings here. Yeah. So I hope you don't take this question the wrong way. Does it sound like a good deal? Is it a fair swap in terms of the details? What we, at least what's being reported publicly right now, does it sound like a balanced deal? I guess maybe that's the better word.
Well, let's be frank. Israel cherishes the life of every Jewish citizen. Hamas uses their own people as human shields. So that's the reality. And as you already pointed out in the earlier segment, that Israel traded 1,000 Palestinian prisoners to save the life of one Israeli soldier. So it's a calculus. Obviously, you're getting 3 Palestinian prisoners. Again, from what the reports say, women and children not convicted of a capital crime or murder of an Israeli citizen are being released. But again, that's the reality, that human life, there's a bartering, and certain nationalities, age, gender, whatnot, all are part of the equation. But most of these hostages that were taken were non-combatants. They include young children as old as 3 months and the elderly as old as 85-year-old grandparents. And in some cases, whole families were taken, and some of those families are going to be broken up, where their children and or the wives will be released, but the husbands and or male siblings will be left behind.
I just think about that 3-year-old American who is going to celebrate a birthday this Friday, and hoping that, you know, that child is with her family. My heart just breaks thinking about the kids that are involved. Is there any concern with this extended pause as Hamas, you know, regroups, rearms, that these hostages could be moved from wherever they are? We know that vast tunnel network, and that a lot of them have been hidden there and have been staying there. Is there any concern that they could be moved, and whatever intelligence that the IDF has had in the past may not be as accurate anymore after these days go by?
Well, absolutely. Part of the deal was that the IDF could not fly drones overhead. So, of course, Hamas will be moving not only men around, arms around, resupplying, refitting, but they will likely be moving these hostages around, which will again complicate any effort by the IDF to actually pull off a hostage rescue mission.
Oh, secondary to the family reunification, which is obviously the human element of this is most important, but the intelligence the hostages may share is critical. And then 2, does this open the door for other similar pauses and more hostages to get to freedom? And that, of course, will play out in the days and weeks ahead. Former hostage coordinator and U.S. Navy SEAL Officer Dan O'Shea. Thank you, Dan, once again for joining us.